Have you ever caught yourself thinking something like, "It's better to keep quiet, not worth starting a fight. I'm the bigger person here." And yet deep inside, a tightness grows in your throat. Your chest feels heavy. Your thoughts swirl with everything you wanted to say, but didn't. How often have you bitten back your truth? Just to keep the peace? Well, this might sting to hear, but each time you do that, you abandon a piece of yourself. We live in a world that idolizes politeness. From a young age, we're trained to believe that being well-mannered means staying silent, that not rocking the boat is a mark of maturity, that quietness in the face of discomfort is a strength. But that's not strength. That's fear dressed up as virtue, fear of disappointing others, fear of seeming difficult or emotional, fear of losing love, approval, or control. So you stay silent. You comply. You swallow your anger. You smile when something in you wants to scream. And it doesn't feel like betrayal in the moment, but make no mistake, this is how self-abandonment takes root. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw this clearly. He understood that much of what we consider good behavior is simply fear wearing a moral mask, a fear of confrontation, a fear of our own strength, a fear of standing alone. And here's what's even more unsettling. Society rewards this fear. You're praised for keeping calm, for being agreeable, for not starting drama. But what they're really praising is your submission. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a system of values created by those who felt powerless, those who couldn't fight back. So they convinced themselves that surrender was nobility, that silence was wisdom, that obedience was enlightenment. And over time, this mindset became the standard. Today, most people don't even question it. You think you're being good, but in reality, you're just avoiding conflict. You think you're being mature, but really you're afraid. Let that settle in. Ask yourself, how many times have you allowed someone to cross a line just to keep the peace? How many times have you sacrificed your dignity to preserve someone else's comfort? How many times have you laughed off a disrespectful comment, shrugged away an offense, or told yourself it wasn't a big deal when your gut told you otherwise? This isn't about becoming hostile. It's not about attacking others. It's about reclaiming your right to have a voice and a boundary. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't learn to face conflict, conflict won't disappear. It'll simply turn inward. It'll show up as resentment, as tension in your body, as bitterness in your relationships, as unexplained fatigue, as silence that slowly hollows you out. One day, you won't be able to hold it anymore. You'll either erupt in anger, saying things you regret, or you'll withdraw so deeply that you become numb to your own life. And the worst part, you'll believe that being good means being harmless, that your role is to endure, to be quiet, to disappear. But nature, life, doesn't want you to disappear. There is another path, a way of living that doesn't require erasing yourself. It begins by understanding conflict is not the enemy. It is the gate to your power, to your truth, to your transformation. When Nietzsche looked at this deeply ingrained fear of confrontation, he didn't see a personal failing. He saw the consequence of centuries of conditioning. And in this journey, we'll explore where that conditioning came from, how it still operates in your daily life, and most importantly, how to break free from it. So if you're still with me, stay with me. The truths ahead might be uncomfortable, but they might also set you free. Let's keep going. In order to understand why conflict triggers so much fear, you have to look beyond your personal experiences. This fear isn't just about that one argument you had, or that one time you got yelled at for speaking up. It's deeper. It's buried in the moral history of humanity itself. Nietzsche explored this in brutal detail. In his work on the genealogy of morals, he proposed that the values we hold today, what we call goodness, virtue, humility, didn't arise from enlightenment. They arose from weakness. There was once a time when power ruled openly. The noble the warriors. They didn't apologize for who they were. They lived boldly, asserted themselves. They set limits. They created. They dominated. And in their worldview, good meant strength. It meant courage. It meant standing tall and living fully. But not everyone could live that way. There were others, the weak, the resentful, those who lacked strength or status. Unable to win in the world of direct action, they found a workaround. They inverted the values. They declared that power was bad, that pride was sin, that boldness was evil, and in turn, they glorified the opposite, obedience, silence, self-denial, not because it was better, but because it was all they had. They called it morality, but in truth, it was survival strategy. Nietzsche called it what it really was, a morality of resentment, of powerlessness masked as wisdom, of submission parading as virtue. This morality, born out of the inability to act, did not die with ancient history. It's still here, alive in the language you were raised with. Don't talk back. Be nice. Don't make a scene. Just let it go. Be the bigger person. From childhood, you were conditioned to link confrontation with evil and submission with goodness. And so now, as an adult, every time you feel the urge to say no, to disagree, to draw a boundary, you feel guilt because that ancient morality still rules you. But that doesn't mean you're weak by nature. It just means you were trained to believe that being small was somehow noble. And the result? You doubt yourself. You hesitate. You second-guess your own instincts. You convince yourself you're being wise by avoiding confrontation. But in truth, you're just scared. And the more you run from conflict, the stronger that fear becomes. But here's where it gets even more dangerous. The anger you suppress, it doesn't go away. It sits inside, and it ferments, and it rots. And over time, it becomes resentment, a quiet poison that eats at your spirit. Resentment doesn't make noise. It hides quietly in the pauses where truth should have been spoken, in the moments you smiled, when your heart clenched, in the words you rehearsed but never said. It's not just a feeling. It's a consequence. The consequence of denying yourself over and over again. Nietzsche saw resentment as one of the most corrosive forces in the human soul, not because it's dramatic, but because it's subtle, because it disguises itself as morality, as restraint, as emotional maturity. But behind all that is just anger, trapped, sour, tightly sealed inside the body. Resentment begins when natural force in you, the will to act, to speak, to resist, is blocked, but energy doesn't disappear. So if you can't express it outwardly, it turns inward. You become tense, bitter. Over time, this suppressed force starts reshaping your beliefs. And suddenly, you're telling yourself stories to justify the silence. I'm above this. I'm choosing peace. I'm morally superior because I don't react. But underneath that moral pose is an unacknowledged fury, frustration left unprocessed, power left unused. You may not admit it to others. You may not even admit it to yourself. But you feel it when you replay conversations in your head, thinking about what you should have said, when you wake up angry and can't explain why, when you resent the very people you try to keep peace with. That's resentment, and it builds slowly like rust. It eats at your confidence. It clouds your relationships. It dulls your ability to feel joy. And Nietzsche warned, the one who lives with resentment isn't just a victim. They become a participant in their own imprisonment. Every time you avoid saying what needs to be said, you feed the very system that keeps you small. You reinforce the cage. And here's the trap. The more resentment you hold, the less energy you have to confront. And the less you confront, the more resentment you collect. It's a vicious loop, a slow, quiet collapse. And eventually, it becomes identity. People begin to define themselves by their suffering. They wear their silence like a badge. They call themselves martyrs. But inside, they're full of grief, rage, and fear. This is not goodness. This is decay. But Nietzsche didn't believe we were meant to rot. He believed in transformation, radical, soul-deep rebirth. And he called this transformation the will to power. Now, let's be clear. Many people misunderstand this idea. They hear will to power and imagine conquest, domination, ego, control. But that's not what Nietzsche meant. The will to power is not about overpowering others. It's about refusing to be overpowered by life itself. It is the raw energy of existence, the urge to expand, to express, to rise, to grow, to say, I am here and I matter. It's the same force that pushes a tree through concrete, the same fire that drives creation, innovation, transformation. And when that will is blocked, you don't become peaceful. You become poison. You feel numb, disconnected, directionless. You stop asserting yourself and start disappearing. And here's the key. You were taught to fear this inner force. You were told that it was wrong to be assertive, that setting boundaries was rude, that anger was ugly, that standing your ground was selfish. So you shrank. You played small. You waited for permission to be who you are. But permission is never coming. You have to reclaim your own power. And how do you do that? First, by calling fear what it is. Not virtue, not maturity. Just fear. Fear of disapproval. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being liked. Second, by practicing truth in small doses. Start saying no. Start setting limits. Start honoring the discomfort that comes when you choose yourself. Third, by facing conflict with presence, not to dominate, not to destroy, but to live fully and honestly, even when it's hard. Because the will to power isn't about force. It's about integrity. It's about learning to stand tall, not to crush others, but to stop letting yourself be crushed. And Nietzsche knew this is an instant. It's a process, a deep inner transformation. And he gave us one of the most powerful metaphors to understand it, the metamorphosis of the spirit. He described 3 stages of transformation: the camel, the lion, the child. Each one represents a different phase of awakening. The camel is the one who carries burdens. They live by duty. They say yes to everything, even when it crushes them. You must be polite. You must obey. You must endure. The camel kneels down, lets others load it with expectations, and carries the weight in silence. It thinks this is strength, but it's just obedience. And worst of all, the camel becomes proud of its suffering. I carry more than anyone. I am the most loyal, the most humble. This is where most people live their entire lives. But if the camel awakens, if the pressure becomes too much, it begins to rebel. And then it transforms. It becomes a lion. The lion is the one who learns to say no. No to guilt. No to inherited roles. No to moral systems that demand your silence. The lion doesn't seek to destroy, but it fights for a space where it can exist honestly. It carves out a new reality. But to get there, it must face a terrifying enemy. Nietzsche called it the dragon of thou shalt. It's the inner critic, the commandments, the internalized rules etched into your psyche. You shall not speak up. You shall not disagree. You shall always be kind, even when it kills you. The lion must fight this dragon, not with violence, but with clarity, with the courage to say, I reject what no longer serves me. And once the lion reclaims that freedom, a new possibility emerges. The third transformation, the child. The child is not naive. It's not helpless. The child is creation itself. It is light, play, spontaneity. It no longer lives in reaction to the past. It no longer obeys out of fear. It chooses freely moment to moment what feels true. The child doesn't avoid conflict, but doesn't seek it either. It moves through life authentically, unburdened, curious, open. And this, Nietzsche said, is true liberation, not the absence of struggle, but the freedom to meet it with your whole being. So far, we've explored how fear conflict is rooted in conditioning, how resentment poisons us silently, and how Nietzsche's stages of transformation, from camel to lion to child, offer a way out. But now comes the deepest layer of this journey, the question that shakes the very ground beneath you. Who are you really beneath the silence? Nietzsche challenges us with one of the boldest ideas in philosophy, not just to live, but to become who we truly are, not the version of you that pleases your parents, not the one that follows society's script, not the character you play to keep people comfortable, but the you that exists underneath all the roles, the masks, the conditioning. In his book Ecce Homo, Nietzsche speaks of this process not as something easy or natural, but as a radical act of self-discovery. Because here's the truth. Most people never become themselves. They live entire lives trying to meet expectations. They walk someone else's path. They speak with someone else's voice. And each time you betray your truth for the sake of harmony, a piece of you fades. Each time you say yes when your soul says no, you drift further away from who you are. It's not just personal frustration. It's existential erosion. And Nietzsche understood, avoiding conflict isn't just a behavioral choice. It's a spiritual obstacle. Because conflict, real, honest, conscious conflict, is the mirror where you meet yourself. In disagreement, you discover what you stand for. In resistance, you learn what you truly believe. In friction, you remember your strength. Without conflict, there is no clarity. Without clarity, there is no authenticity. Without authenticity, there is no life. Just performance. Just survival. Just a well-behaved shell. So to become who you are requires a sacred kind of rebellion, the courage to say no to the roles that don't fit, to the norms that don't nourish, to the fears that keep you small. And more than that, it requires stepping off the beaten path entirely, because the real you has no pre-written script. There is no one-size-fits-all morality, no guaranteed approval, no applause waiting at the end, only a blank page. That's why it's terrifying, and that's why most people never do it. It's easier to stay in a herd, to follow the rules, to sacrifice self for comfort. But here's what you gain in return: integrity, freedom, a life that is yours. Each time you face conflict honestly, you carve out space for your truth. Each time you draw a boundary, you declare, I exist. Each time you speak, even with fear, you plant a flag in your own territory. Nietzsche never promised this path would be easy. He promised it would be real. And that's more valuable than any fleeting validation. But to walk this path, you must accept something hard. Silence, in the face of injustice, is not virtue. It's consent. Each time you stay quiet when someone crosses a line, you teach them how to treat you. Each time you shrink yourself for the sake of comfort, you reinforce the very systems that oppress you. Your silence doesn't protect you. It exposes you. It tells the world, I'm not willing to defend what matters to me. And guess what? Some people will take advantage of that. Not everyone acts in good faith. Some will see your silence and use it. Some will see your compliance and escalate. This is not fear-mongering. This is truth. And Nietzsche knew it. He warned us. A morality rooted in fear doesn't lead to peace. It leads to decay, a slow death of the spirit, a life that looks calm on the outside, but is filled with quiet misery inside. So the next time you feel the urge to stay silent, ask yourself honestly, is this wisdom or is this fear? Am I holding back because it's truly not worth it, or because I'm scared? That question can change everything, because here's the truth. Becoming who you are doesn't happen in passive agreement. It happens in active courage, in the refusal to be erased, in the brave, shaky act of speaking your truth. When your voice trembles, your palms sweat, and your body wants to flee. That's not weakness. That's power. That's presence. You were not born to carry everyone else's burden forever. You are not here to be an eternal camel. Within you is the lion, the one who says, no more, the one who makes space to exist. And within that lion is the child, the one who creates freely, who laughs, who explores, who chooses their own path. This is not some lofty dream. It's your birthright, but it requires action, and it requires that you start now. So if this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade into the background. Let it become the beginning of your transformation. Take a breath and take a step. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below. Say it out loud. I choose to no longer remain silent. Write it. Claim it. Let the world hear it. But more importantly, let you hear it. Because the moment you put it into words, the journey begins. And don't stop here. There's more to uncover, more fire to reclaim, more space to take back. The next video continues this journey. It will help you go even deeper. I'll see you there.